So when we left off, oh, sorry, before I start, if you didn't pick up your midterm on Monday, then I have the ones that weren't picked up. So you can come get it. I'll work on the class. Okay, so the other thing I should say is that contrary to the beliefs of many of the grad students I taught this morning, I was not in Detroit for the World Series game. That was not why I was not here on Monday. I mean, it doesn't even make any sense because the last game was Sunday anyway, but anyway. No, so I went in 2010 the first time that they won, and my wife did not go, she couldn't go that year, but this time she went, and I had to teach in the morning and the afternoon, so it didn't really make sense. It's also kind of shocking. I mean, I'm from the Bay Area originally, so they had never won, the Giants never won a World Series since I was a kid. In fact, they never won a World Series since they moved to San Francisco from New York back in the 1950s. So when it happened in 2010, I was like really surprised. I mean, pleasantly so, but I hadn't necessarily expected it to ever happen. And then the fact that it happened again in 2012 is just kind of bizarre almost, but whatever, I'm not complaining. So when we left off on Friday, we're talking about the effect or potential effects of fast food on obesity. We saw the Super Size Me clip where he demonstrated that if you cram an incredible amount of fast food into yourself in a very short period of time, you'll get very sick, which I think isn't a huge surprise. And then I started talking about why it is I think that we don't necessarily find any substantial effects on obesity of like exposure to fast food in our study. And part of it comes down to this sort of offsetting hypothesis. So to explore this hypothesis a little bit more, what we did is we got data from this USDA survey, which basically has, so they take a group of people and they have them keep what are known as food diaries, where they basically detail like every item that they're eating over two non-consecutive days. And so using those data, so we basically have like a record of what several thousand people are eating, and we know where they're eating it. So when they eat at a restaurant, we know, and when they're eating at home, we know. And so what we do is we conduct two analyses using these data. So one is what I'll call a meal level analysis. So you're sort of collapsing all the calories consumed and all the items consumed down to the meal level. So it's like you're eating 3 meals per day, and we know what you're eating and how much you're eating in terms of calories and where you're eating it. And then we just do a meal level regression of caloric intake. So basically the outcome here, or the dependent variable, the left-hand side variable, is the number of calories per meal. And we regress that on a indicator or a dummy variable that tells you whether or not that restaurant, or whether or not that meal was eaten in a restaurant, or whether it was eaten at home. So if there's a positive coefficient on that variable, then that indicates that people are eating more calories at a restaurant than they would at home. And then the second analysis we do is a daily level regression of caloric intake on essentially a restaurant indicator. So now what you're thinking, or what we're thinking is you're sort of collapsing or summing up all of the calories that people eat during the day, and then seeing whether or not there's a correlation between the number of calories you eat during the entire day and whether or not you ate at a restaurant. And so the prediction, if this sort of offsetting hypothesis, so the hypothesis here again is that if you eat at a restaurant, you're going to tend to eat more during that meal, but then during the rest of the day, you might eat somewhat less. And so if that is true, then the prediction from these two regressions is that the meal coefficient is going to be bigger than this daily level regression coefficient, right? Because what's going to happen here is that maybe somebody will eat, say, an extra 200 calories at the restaurant, but then they'll be full for the rest of the day, and so they'll eat 100 calories less during the rest of the day than they otherwise would have eaten had they not eaten at the restaurant. And so that like negative 100 calorie effect is going to partially offset the positive 200 calorie effect that you observe just during that one meal. And that's in fact what we find. So just to sort of summarize these effects. So what we're doing here is we're putting in what we call individual fixed effects. So you can think of it as like within individuals, we're comparing days. So for the same individual, you take one person from the data. We're going to compare how much they ate on a day that they ate at a restaurant versus how much they ate on a day that they didn't eat at a restaurant. And so the justification or the motivation behind doing this is that if we compare total calorie consumption across individuals, then we're concerned that basically the people who choose to eat at restaurants might be different than the people who don't choose to eat at restaurants. And so there could be some sort of like confounding variables there that potentially are both correlated with whether or not you eat at a restaurant and sort of what your like overall preference is for the number of calories you're going to eat. So by instead sort of isolating the analysis so that we're always doing comparisons within the same individual at different points in time, so basically different days or different meals, then we're hoping to basically eliminate some of those potential omitted variables biases. So when we do that, what we find is that when we look at the meal level average, we estimate that eating at a restaurant is associated with an extra about 240 calories, which is a pretty big effect. So the average number of calories at a restaurant is high. Oh, is it not? Sorry. It says that it is. I think so. Should I try now?
Yeah. This one's different from every other one on campus. So. Okay. Let me give it to the
Okay. So if you look at they give you the option of podcasting or webcasting it, which honestly seems like creates a lot of extra overhead. I don't know. Do people actually use it in the class? Some people. Okay. Well, at least there's some benefit then. So when you look at basically the way to interpret this table is if you look at within a single person, if you look at meals that they're eating at a restaurant, they eat I guess it would be something like probably around 900 calories or so, and then meals they don't eat at a restaurant, they eat somewhere below 600 or 700 calories. So it's a pretty big difference in percentage terms, right? It's basically like you're talking about well over a 30% increase in calories at that given meal when you're eating at a restaurant. But then when you blow it up to sort of the daily level regression and look at days in which somebody eats at a restaurant versus days in which somebody doesn't eat at a restaurant, then the effect becomes much smaller. So now the estimate itself is only like an extra 35 calories over the entire course of the day. So this is basically implying a really big offset, like an offset that's over well over 80% of the calories that you ate for that single meal at the restaurant. But there's also some uncertainty about it. So in parentheses, you basically have a standard error. So if you want like a 95% confidence interval, you would multiply the number of the parentheses by 2 and then add or subtract it. So basically, like you can't rule out the possibility that this coefficient could be 100 or greater, which would be closer to like about a 50% offset. And that would actually be kind of similar or sort of consistent with the experimental literature on this subject. So it turns out they've actually run experiments, probably I think mostly with like college students. But what they've done is essentially like they recruit these students to be in the experiment. And then they have them come in around noon. And so half the students, they randomly select the students, and half of them are going to be fed like a pretty large meal, and then the other half will be fed like a smaller meal. And then they're instructed not to eat anything over the rest of the course of the day. Now, of course, they're not going to like send research assistants home to follow the students around and make sure they don't eat anything. So you can't perfectly enforce this. But assuming that they actually follow the instructions, then they come back that evening and they're allowed to eat as much as they want. So they're sort of given like free food, and the researchers record how much they're eating. So the idea here again is that if eating a bigger meal during lunch satiates you, then we should see you eating less at the end of the day relative to the students who were assigned like the smaller meal. And they do find that. So basically, they find about like a 50% offset. So it's like the students who get the big meal might eat an extra like 400 calories at lunchtime, but then they'll eat about 200 calories less at dinner. So they'll still be gaining weight if they continue to eat the big meal relative to the small meal, but they wouldn't gain as much as you would expect. So just to wrap up this particular study, so we don't really find any strong evidence that restaurants have no appreciable effect on obesity. The food intake data support the hypothesis that consumers are engaging in this compensatory or offsetting behavior, and that's kind of consistent with what they find in lab experiments. Also, I didn't show you this in the table on the last slide, but the food intake data also suggests that individuals who have high caloric demand choose to eat at restaurants, explaining the previous findings. So the other thing we found is that if you sort of compare across individuals, like those who end up going to restaurants versus those who don't end up going to restaurants, the people who go to restaurants are eating more than the people who don't go to restaurants, even at home. So that does indicate that part of it is essentially demand, that people who are eating more for whatever reason are more likely to end up eating at restaurants. So again, the message here is not that restaurants are, particularly fast food restaurants, are healthy. They are definitely not a source of healthy food. I mean, they can be if you just order particular items, but I think for most people they're not. But rather, the sort of take home is that you have to think carefully about what the counterfactual is and about what people would eat if they weren't eating at those restaurants. And so, if somebody has unhealthy eating patterns, that's probably going to be reflected both in terms of what they eat at restaurants and what they eat at home. And if you can't sort of induce some sort of change in what they're eating at home, then just shutting off this like access to restaurants channel is probably not going to have a big effect on obesity. So the kind of larger policy message here for obesity policy, I think, is that narrowly targeted policies are unlikely to succeed because they're really only targeting a single input, whereas there are essentially multiple inputs or multiple channels through which people can get unhealthy food. It turns out they can also have kind of large welfare impacts then because you're kind of making it inconvenient for people to get food, but you're not simply changing what they're actually eating. But I think more generally, the message is when you're thinking or you're targeting a specific outcome that's the product of many inputs, you can't just regulate one of those inputs and expect to have a big impact on the outcome, which might explain why many of the sort of obesity interventions that have been studied in schools, sort of school-based things like improving lunches and stuff, haven't demonstrated any larger or meaningful effects. So the other paper that I want to talk about, which I think is interesting, is focused specifically on these calorie posting laws that I mentioned at the beginning when we were talking about like different policies that are trying to reduce obesity by targeting sort of this restaurant channel. Yep, Alexis. Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh, yeah. Right. So that's a very good question. And so first of all, there are some studies that have actually looked at, I think, state-level soda taxes, and in general, they haven't found very large effects on obesity or on like caloric intake. And assuming we have time, I'll discuss briefly like one or two of those studies at the very end today. As for the Richmond measure itself, I think that in some ways it's probably less. So the city is small, so in some sense it should be less likely to work on a state-level tax because it'll be easier to avoid because you could just go right outside the city border. The one difference is I'm not sure. I don't know what the sort of magnitudes of the different taxes are. So for like the state-level taxes that they looked at, I don't think that I'm not aware of any state that has a really high soda tax per se. So if the Richmond tax is significantly higher, just in terms of the overall like cents per can or whatever, then maybe that would work towards its favor. I will say that we have one of our faculty members, Sophia Villas-Boas. I don't know, some of you may or may not have taken classes with her, but she has sort of these access to the Safeway scanner data, which are essentially like you check out a Safeway and they scan all the stuff. So she for very like when she can basically write a proposal for them to like it's not like she can just download the whole thing on her computer, which would be way too big anyway, but she can sort of like write proposals to take extracts of the entire database of like what's being bought at Safeway and then do analyses with it. So I think we're sort of thinking, I don't know, I have no idea what the odds are on that measure passing, but I guess we'll find out in less than 2 weeks. But if it does pass, we'll probably look at the Safeway scanner data and just see whether or not we can even see sort of what behavioral responses to it. Like so first of all, do you actually see a decrease in purchases in Richmond, at least at Safeway stores, and then is there any sort of spillover into the stores in the surrounding cities or something like that? Right. Sure. Then a positive effect. Yeah. So I think that I don't think you could measure like effect on obesity just because I mean, unless you wanted to literally do your own data collection where you like went and surveyed people about their weight and honestly probably have to like actually weigh them to get a really good like a really precise measure, and that would be really expensive to get like a pretty large sample in Richmond. So short of doing that, there's no way you can really study the obesity outcome just because there aren't data on that. So I think at the most what one might be able to do or what we might be able to guess if it passes is just look at sort of total consumption of soda, and then you have to start then making assumptions about like are they actually drinking the whole thing, and we kind of have this from the medical literature, we kind of know like roughly the relationship between like calories taken in and weight gain eventually and so forth, but you wouldn't be able to study exactly like obesity itself. But you're sort of making I think your point is very similar to like what's on the slide in the sense that you could imagine that this doesn't have a big effect on obesity because people get it outside Richmond or whatever, but it is essentially generating what we call these welfare costs of you're kind of making it inconvenient for people or making the businesses lose money or something like that, but not sort of achieving the outcome that you're hoping to achieve. To measure it? Yeah, no, I mean this is just based on the assumption or hope that it would have some effect. But yeah, I mean the other thing that was recently passed is this like thing in New York City about how large a soda can be, I think, and I'm kind of interested to see what happens with that, just in the sense of, I mean, to some extent you could almost think there's like, so on the one hand you think, well, if you have like a 48-ounce soda or something, how many people are actually buying that because it's just an absurd amount of soda. So on the one hand, then you might think that limiting it to a more reasonable size wouldn't necessarily have a large impact on the total amount that people are drinking. On the other hand, you could think that there may also be some sort of framing going on in the sense of like people might just naturally gravitate towards ordering like the medium soda. And so if the large is like 48 ounces and then the medium is like, or the medium one is like 24 ounces, then they'll be ordering like a 24 ounce soda before. And then if you say no, the large can't be any larger than 24 ounces or whatever the maximum size they legislated, and so then the medium has to be like 16 ounces, then people may be switching to the 16 ounce soda, even though the 24 ounce size was what they were ordering before and it's still available. For sort of more psychological reasons, I guess they may kind of like be thinking, well, the default is the medium, and that's what I order. And so now the medium is smaller, and then they would keep ordering that. So it'd be interesting to see kind of what happens there. I don't know if anybody's set up a study to try to look at it or not. Okay, so this, the next study I'm discussing also turns out focuses on a New York policy, and I think it's sort of related. So there are these calorie posting regulations. You have to post on the menu. Usually it's like for stores that have more than a certain number of locations, basically like chain restaurants. They have to post on their menu the number of calories in each of the items that they're selling you. And so the question here that policymakers would hopefully want to know is whether or not these regulations induce people to make healthier choices when they're going to these chain restaurants. And so this is somewhat different than like the question that Dave Mazza, my co-author, and I looked at in the sense that this is now talking about like changing the restaurant environment. So like our study is just looking at access to restaurants, basically sort of looking at it as an either-or proposition. Like either you're going to go to the restaurant or you're not, and how does that affect your obesity? What this study is doing is looking at sort of, let's assume that you are going to go to the restaurant regardless. What happens if we kind of change the environment in the restaurant? So in particular, what happens if we like give you more information about how many calories you're going to be eating? And so they study this question using data from Starbucks. So Starbucks is not the obvious choice here. I mean, what you really want is like McDonald's or Burger King or Taco Bell or something like that, because that's really kind of what these regulations are intending to target. And they're not choosing Starbucks because they think it's like the ideal restaurant to study. It's just because I think they knew somebody in Starbucks, and so they actually got access to all of the purchase level data. So it's sort of like how Sophia has access to the scanner, the Safeway scanner data. They got access to the Starbucks data. So the policy background here is that on April 1st, 2008, Starbucks changed its New York City stores to comply with these with the new calorie posting law. So New York City passed this law that says you have to post the number of calories on the menu. There was a specific date for compliance, and Starbucks chose to. I mean, you could imagine a scenario in which Starbucks said, you know what, we're just going to roll this out nationwide and just put calories everywhere. But that's not what they chose to do. So they were forced by law to update their menus in New York City, but they didn't do it in other cities. So what the authors do is they compare purchases in New York City before and after the calorie posting law to purchases in Boston and Philadelphia, which are essentially their like control cities that aren't affected by policy. So basically a diffs and diffs type design. So the pre-period is before April 1st, 2008. The post-period is afterwards, and the treated cities New York and the control cities are Boston and Philadelphia. So those didn't have calorie posting laws. And the key assumption in order to get an unbiased estimate of the effect of this policy on people's choices, like Starbucks consumers' choices, is that purchases in New York City would have evolved similarly to purchases in Boston and Philly, absent the calorie posting law. So if they hadn't passed this law, then hopefully New York City would have followed the same trends that they observed in Boston and Philadelphia. So they have this data set that contains the actual universe of Starbucks purchases in these cities. So in theory, they know every single item bought at every Starbucks in these three cities during this period. And they split the data into beverage transactions and food transactions. And then they compare changes in calories per transaction in New York City to changes in calories per transaction in the two control cities. And I think the results are most easily seen by looking at a couple of figures. So the first thing they find is that the calorie posting law really seems to have no effect on beverage calories per transaction. So here you can see basically the time series of average calories per beverage transaction at Starbucks for both New York, which is the solid blue line, and then for Boston and Philadelphia, which are being combined together into this dashed red line. And there's sort of a couple things to note here. So the vertical line here is basically representing when the policy takes effect in New York City. So if there were some effect of the policy, then basically what you would expect is that these two series should essentially diverge after April 1st, 2008. They should like grow further apart because it looks like New York City is already lower than Boston and Philadelphia. But presumably if the calorie posting law causes people to even further reduce their calories purchased, then the blue line should fall relative to the red dashed line. And that doesn't really seem to happen. So in particular, it looks like the two, like whatever shocks are occurring in, say, the Northeast in general, seem to be affecting both New York and Boston and Philadelphia in pretty similar ways, right? Because you can see that when New York spikes here, then Boston and Philly also spike. In particular, when there's this big spike around December in 2008, there's also a similar spike in calories per transaction in Boston and Philadelphia. And so definitely in this region, I think what's happening is that like you're getting more sort of people going out to Starbucks around the holidays, and then they have these like double sweetened pumpkin spice latte something or other, and people are offering it, and people are buying it, and the number of calories per drink is going up substantially. Whereas probably like people are just getting coffee on their way to work, or probably just getting like a coffee or something. So coffee itself has no calories if you don't add any milk. There's like 5 calories or something trivial like that. So there's sort of these there's substantial variation in the number of calories per beverage as you look over the year, and it definitely seems to have a seasonal component. But importantly, the shocks in New York seem to be mirrored as shocks in Boston and Philadelphia, and it doesn't seem like there's really any change between the two, basically change in the difference between the two cities once you pass the law or once you enact the law in April of 2008. So for beverages, it seems like there's no effect, but for food, it seems like there is some effect. So now they're looking at the number of food calories per transaction, and they find that drops by about 15% after the policy gets rolled out in New York. So before the policy, so before April 2008, you can see that New York actually, the transactions in New York actually usually involve more food per transaction than the transactions in Boston and Philadelphia. But after 2008, essentially those two series reverse, right? So now Boston and Philadelphia lie above the series for New York, and so it seems like the law is really driving down the number of food calories per transaction in New York relative to what you're observing at the same time in Boston and Philadelphia. So for food, it does seem to have a significant impact. And if you combine these two things together, so look at sort of total calories, both beverages plus food, then the overall calories per transaction fall by about 6%. Okay? So in terms of like the number of food calories people are buying per transaction, it's actually less. So I mean, if you go back to the two figures, you can see